have a personal policy in this whole columnist commentator role of not getting upset about things before they're in place to be upset about. But I'll make a little bit of an exception today. Good morning to you. Good Wednesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates, the other two teams in town that I cover. Hope you'll check those out as well. Flyers 3, Penguins 2 via shootout. It's not true that the Penguins have not won a single shootout since Les Binkley in 1968, but it can feel like that at times. Artur Shilov's made some good first stops throughout the second and third periods, then was gifted a stop in the shootout when Travis Konechny, I guess somebody just unplugged his controller or something, but then the other two were easy conversions, just as all three were the other night against the Blue Jackets. I don't mean to make too big a deal out of shootouts, but, you know, it's been going on for a long time around here, and those are real points that get forfeited. The Penguins are now 7-2-2. The reason they were able to get a point out of this is that Sidney Crosby scored the tying goal in regulation. The team as a whole really rebounded in the final 20-plus minutes. This was Dan Muse after the game.
In third period, I thought we got back to what's been working, what was working there. And, at the second and third period there against St. Louis, I thought we were playing north, we were playing fast. Guys were supporting each other. I thought it got away from us there in the second, for way too long. I think it's just, we need to be more consistent with that. A lot of it just has to do with, I think everybody kind of being on the same page. A lot of it starts with our puck movement and just the puck support. In the second period, we just kind of got too stretched out. So now when we do get the puck, we're not really in good positions there to continue to move up ice. And, when that's happening, now you're defending more. And it can be, an ugly cycle. And that's what we saw in the second period. I thought we got back to more of the game that we want to play there in the third period. But again, it's, we want to be more consistent with the overall play.
All right. I'm sufficiently distracted by a thing that has yet to happen, but I'm getting some bad vibes, including some actual vibes that one or both of the teenagers could in fact be sent back to juniors. Now, I know that should no longer be a discussion point. I know, or at least I sense, that all of us have collectively just moved past this subject, because when you watch Ben Kindle, when you watch Harrison Brunick, you might not agree that they're 100% ready for the NHL, but you're going to get a universal hell no to sending them back to juniors. This game in Philadelphia last night was Kindle's 9th, and it's after the 9th game that, because of their age and their junior status, if you're not going to keep them in the NHL, then you have to send them back to juniors. You can't send them to Wilkes-Barre, which is, even if you believe they don't belong here yet, that's where you would put them. Doesn't matter. Stupid rule, can't do it. So here we are. This was game 11 for the team. This was game 9 again for Kindle. And Brunick stays stuck on 7 games because he was scratched yet again, this time for Owen Pickering's recall. And all of this is kind of starting to fail the sniff test. Meaning, it's one thing to be as open and transparent as Kyle Dubas has been about the load management. Muse has been the daily voice on that subject. Also welcome. And they're going so far, Muse is specifically, as letting everybody know in advance they're not going to play. You'll never have cause to criticize anybody being open and honest about stuff. And I've said repeatedly, I've got zero issue with the load management. I didn't like seeing both of them get scratched for a home game when you had an entire week's worth of games coming up on the road. that was principally on the basis of it being a totally tone-deaf call. But then, when you start seeing Brunik get scratched in back-to-back games, and you wonder maybe he isn't healthy, but then the one game that he does play, you can tell from him flying around that he's perfectly fine. And then you see Pickering come up, seemingly out of nowhere. He's played okay. We've talked about it on the program. Wilkes-Barre Scranton's off to a 7-0 start, and he's been a component of that. But he comes up to bump Brunik? You following me on this? Like it's almost as if, well, if we bring up one kid, it's going to mitigate the public blowback if we send down the other one. Listen, before I go too far, I'm going to just reiterate this stance. And as strongly as I did before, maybe with a little bit of extra gusto after having watched these kids. They do not benefit from another blessed day in the Western Hockey League. In fact, there's a very real risk, a much greater risk for both of those prospects of regressing in those environments than anything at all that could befall them by spending this season even partially in the National Hockey League. The rule works against you, but go right ahead and work against the rule. Keep them here. Find a way. Navigate it. Be intelligent about it. Be deliberate about it. Send them both to the World Junior Championships if that's deemed what's best for them. To be again within a really, really good group of their own peers, their age peers, and maybe get themselves some gold out of it. But do not send them back to the Western Hockey League. Nothing good comes of that for anyone except for those respective junior teams, and I couldn't care less about them. If you're doing what's best for the prospects, you, as Dubas and staff, can't come close to sufficiently convincing yourselves that 6 more months of winging it through the Western League is the answer. It's not. And if that had ever been in doubt, it sure isn't now. Let's see Kindle hit that 10th game, Thursday night in St. Paul or Saturday afternoon in Winnipeg. Let's see Brunik stick as well. Not so that the Penguins can have a better chance of making the playoffs, not to entertain the masses, not to pacify morons like me, but because it's best for the prospects. When we come back, J1Q. For those of you who are doing real work in construction, in a warehouse, if you're a mechanic, you want reliable, comfortable gear to help you perform well on the job. Brunt Workwear's got you. They've got waterproof boots, safety toe, soft toe, pull-on, lace-up, whatever you need. You can wear them to work, and if they're not right for you, send them back. I don't know of any other brand doing that. Brunt was tired of the workwear brands out there cutting corners. You work too hard to be stuck in uncomfortable boots that don't hold up. So they built something better. Boots that are insanely comfortable and built for any job site. For a limited time, our listeners get $10 off. Just head to bruntworkwear.com. Use the code DK Sports and you're good to go. After you order, they'll ask you where you heard about Brunt. Do us a favor here at DK Pittsburgh Sports and tell them it was from this show. Today's J1Q comes from Tom, who says, DK, the more I watch these Penguins, the more I see the Rangers fall apart. The more I'm thinking that maybe Mike Sullivan's system was death for the Penguins. Well, I'm not going to pretend that I've seen more of the Rangers than the 2 games that I've covered, but I've obviously seen plenty of the Sullivan system. So I'll take those 2 things, smash them together, and say that it's still a team that just doesn't have any forward depth, like at all. And it's something I'd brought up in one of these shows late in the summertime that I just flat out didn't understand why people were taking the Rangers seriously in their season predictions. Now, that said, I didn't think they would have this level of struggle to score. I certainly didn't think they'd go 0-4-1 in their first 5 games at the Garden, and I definitely didn't think they'd have a week like this one where they lost to the number 32 team in a 32-team league twice, meaning they first lost to the Sharks, and then when the Flames fell into the 32nd spot, they lost to the Flames. That's just not great. But to pin that on the system, no. To pin it on the Rangers having habitually started slowly, including their games against the Penguins, yeah, you can always pin that on the head coach to a degree. Here's what I will say on this subject, and it's got nothing to do with the Rangers or Sullivan. When I watch the Penguins look completely dead to the world, the way they did for the first couple periods against the Blue Jackets, and the way I felt that they did again last night in Philadelphia for the first, period and a half, I'm used to being able to write them off. I'm used to being able to say, wow, they just got nothing tonight. We sure aren't about to see a rally here. Well, we've seen them. Now we've seen when this team isn't at its best or doesn't begin at its best, it has a natural resiliency to it. Always credit the players for that first and foremost. Always credit the leadership within the locker room for that first and foremost. However, from my viewing of this system now, over 11 games, what I'm seeing is a system that lends itself to that. Sullivan used to talk about it a lot. You can't get rattled. Just play. Remember in his first few years, he would use that line all the time. Just play. Just play. That's what we do. We just play. Well, this actually looks like that. Because if you're challenging your athletes to do something in all 3 zones on a consistent basis, whether you have the lead, whether you're behind, whether it's tied in the 3rd period, then nobody really needs to crank up anything systematically or schematically. So when you see the Penguins do what they did last night, especially in the 3rd period when they really were hemming the Flyers in, I mean for long, long stretches, and it wasn't just 1 or 2 lines, it was all of them doing that. That's when you can feel things turning. Takes a while. Eventually, somebody, such as the resident living legend, ties the game up and you get a quality point out of it. And it is a quality point. Don't lose sight of that either. I mentioned a moment ago the 2 worst teams in the National Hockey League, the Sharks and the Flames. You know who the 2 best are so far? 1 and 2 in order, Devils and Penguins. The point streak is intact at 7 games. The only 2 losses in that time were via shootout. Next up are 2 really big challenges in the Wild and the Jets. And, have fun with it. Go at it. Don't be sending these kids down.